Colors of Politics, NRI, on RI Free Radio. Just as the rainbow has many colors, there are multiple opinions and views of the way our state government should be run. Let us be to the point and deliver the truth. It is time to break down the colors of politics.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Colors of Politics on RI Free Radio. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook at Colors of RI. And tonight's show is hosted, or I should say sponsored, by Sophie's Soap, handmade natural soap, right here in Southern Rhode Island. Find on Facebook with Sophie's Soap, Sophiez Soap. And tonight we are interviewing the only wonderful independent in the General Assembly, Blake Filippi. Why don't you give the listeners a description of the area that you cover and what made you choose to start to run to begin with to get into the State House?
So I represent the 36th district, which includes all of Charlestown and Block Island and portions of South Kingstown and Westerly. What got me into politics? I've always had a fascination with it. I've always kind of had a mind for it. I love process. I love policy. And before I ran for office, I was the National Legal Counsel to the 10th Amendment Center, which is a nationwide think tank which advocates for civil liberties and tries to get states to pass laws to preserve the rights of its citizens against sometimes overbearing federal government. And so after doing that for about 3 years and having a lot of successes defending the constitutional rights of the people, I decided that I wanted to try and change things from the inside. And so I ran for office in 2014 and was successful.
That's awesome. Is that group that you were with still doing things too?
Yes, they're active. They're active all over the country. They're really on the cutting edge of the doctrine of nullification. And the doctrine of nullification is essentially that even if something is legal,
doesn't mean it's right.
Well, yeah. Well, a lot of things. There are a lot of laws that aren't right. But for instance, the best way I can describe it is by way of example. The federal government laws against medical marijuana, the United States Supreme Court has deemed those to be constitutional. That does not stop states from saying we are not going to assist in the implementation of those federal laws, and in fact, we're going to license medical marijuana for our sick people. And so nullification is essentially, even if something's legal, even if a federal law is legal, states don't have to assist in the implementation of this federal law. And it's a core aspect of what our Supreme Court has said. It's separate sovereigns. You have the separate sovereign federal government and the separate sovereign state government, and the feds can't compel states to affirmatively act. So we try and get states to refuse to enforce federal laws that are unconstitutional, unwise, or immoral, or unjust.
Does it work the opposite, too? If federal government says you can't, can the state say, yes, I can?
Well, going back to pot, the federal government has said to sick people who are dying of cancer, you can't. And the state says you can. And I think what I really love about the marijuana debate is it shows that the federal government doesn't have the resources to enforce many of its laws, and they actually rely on co-opting state governments to be their enforcers. And with medical marijuana, you see that in mass, states rejecting federal law and the feds not being able to enforce it because they don't have the resources to do so.
That's very intriguing. I didn't even realize that perspective that way.
But, you can do it with a lot of other things. With federal gun laws, states can say we're not going to enforce federal gun laws. You can do it with the bulk collection of data by the NSA. Outside of Bluffdale, Utah, there's a NSA facility that's, I think, 10 football fields. It's massive. And they rely on a subdivision of the state of Utah to supply upwards of 2 million gallons a day of water to cool the supercomputers. Now, there is nothing requiring the state of Utah to supply that water to the Bluffdale, Utah NSA facility, which is basically scooping up all the data which you and I produce on a daily basis. And there's this coalition called nowcoalition.com, I believe, which includes the 10th Amendment Center, the Bill of Rights Defense Committee, and they're petitioning, they have been for the past few years, they've gotten bills introduced, it hasn't passed, to shut off the water to that Bluffdale data center in Bluffdale, Utah. that NSA
Because
data
then
center.
they won't be able to scoop up all this extra
Yeah.
data.
It's essentially, listen, feds, you want to come in and do your own thing. That's fine. That's your right. But we don't have to help you. And that's a core basis of the anti-commandeering doctrine, which it's called, which our United States Supreme Court has blessed over and over and over and over. Every 10 years there's an anti-commandeering case. And I think even the Obamacare decision, there was a anti-commandeering aspect of that where the United States Supreme Court said that the federal government can't force state governments to expand the Medicare programs. And it's been reaffirmed in firearms cases. I think it was out of Arizona, someone versus the United States federal government, where the sheriff refused to enforce a federal law requiring him to run some type of federal background check, and the Supreme Court said, "Listen, feds, you can't force state officials to enforce your regulatory programs." So it's the anti-commandeering doctrine. It works. It's constitutional, and it actually goes back to like 1850. If any of your listeners are aware of what's called the Fugitive Slave Acts, after the Dred Scott decision before the Civil War, there was these federal laws called the Fugitive Slave Laws, and that essentially sent federal marshals into northern states to take runaway slaves and send them back to bondage in the South.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was called that, but I know what you're
those,
talking
those are called the Fugitive Slave Acts, and they were immoral, evil acts. And the alleged runaway slave didn't even have a right to testify at the hearing as to whether he was a runaway slave. It was probably one of the darkest, most immoral times in our country's history. And so many states passed what were called personal liberty laws, including Rhode Island, where it was illegal under state law for any state officials to assist the federal government in the enforcement of the Fugitive Slave Acts, sending black people back to bondage. And these these personal liberty laws were so effective at nullifying this federal law because the federal government couldn't commandeer state resources. They were so effective at nullifying this federal law that when South Carolina seceded from the United States, or attempted to secede from the United States, its number one reason, its declaration for reasons for secession, was the northern nullification of the Fugitive Slave Acts. Because you have to remember, before the Civil War, slavery was legal under federal law.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And there were laws, like I said, saying that, escape slaves to the free North, we got to grab them and give them back. And there was just horrible language that was used. But that doctrine of nullification and separate sovereigns is core to our constitutional republic. And I'm happy today that it's being revived to defend the rights of citizens, just like it was used in the 1850s to stop to stop the Fugitive Slave Acts.
Well,
so that's what got me into politics.
Awesome. Thanks for that history lesson.
Thanks for the Guinness.
But, on basically what you kind of covered is with privacy, with your example, with the 2 million gallons of water. Is that how much water they're actually taking? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so these supercomputers in Bluffdale, Utah are so massive that it's estimated about 2 million gallons of water a day are required to cool them.
Wow, that's a lot of water. But I was more actually trying to go on the privacy point. Just confirming I heard you correctly. You introduced the 8066 just this year for the drones and needing warrants, and I'll let you give a description as to what it is and why you felt you definitely needed to put this through.
Well, I think there's a need as technology becomes pervasive. And let me take a step back. Our United States Supreme Court, when it's been dealing with the Fourth Amendment, your right to privacy, autonomy from government, when it's dealt with these Fourth Amendment cases in the context of evolving technology, it's even said, and I believe it was a decision by Justice Alito, that, listen, we can't keep up with all of this. It's the duty of the legislatures to define when warrants are required in many respects with evolving technology. So
that makes sense.
And why I think the drone, and I'll connect the constitutional issue to drones. So there was a Supreme Court case, I think in the 70s, United States Supreme Court case that said the airspace above your home is not private. You don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy in the airspace above your house, so you don't have Fourth Amendment protections. That involved a case where the cops took a helicopter and flew it over some guy's backyard, and they saw him growing marijuana, and that formed the basis for a search warrant where they went in. And the person tried to say that search warrant was the fruit of a poisonous tree, being that initial unlawful search over his house. Supreme Court said, no, that was a lawful search. Charges stuck. The marijuana came in as evidence. The risk with drones is that Supreme Court precedent now governs what we do. And
with that in every case, there's always a reference to a previous Supreme Court ruling.
It's the precedent. So the precedent is the airspace above your house isn't private. And so that means that now under the Fourth Amendment doesn't restrict police from now flying drones, which are pervasive, easy, $100 a pop, right over your backyard to peer into your backyard, to peer into your house. And that's not a Fourth Amendment violation. And so what the Supreme Court was saying is that, listen, like technology has changed so much that it's the duty of the legislatures to define when warrants are, and are not required. And so bearing that admonition in mind, I submitted this bill, and similar versions had been submitted before, and they haven't passed, which essentially requires the police to obtain a warrant before using a drone. And I think it's prudent and necessary. There's exemptions in the bill for emergencies. There's exemptions for large crowd monitoring. But daily investigatory police work, I think we as a community need to make a decision whether we want drones to be an everyday part of policing and not requiring a warrant prior to their use. I obviously believe a warrant should be required. And we're going to keep pushing this. And if you look at the sponsors of the bill, it's very bipartisan. There's me, who's an independent kind of libertarian dude. And you have Teresa Tanzi and Aaron Regenberg, who are known as progressives. You have Gregor Maury, who's more centrist. And you have Brian Newberry, who's the Republican minority leader. So what's wonderful about privacy issues is that they really transcend the political spectrum. Progressives and libertarians, conservatives, it's something we all feel strongly about. And that's when I think
something to finally be common ground. Yeah,
there's a lot of common ground between what we see as that great divide in the linear political spectrum. There's a lot of common ground for protection of core privacy issues, and we're going to keep beating the drums. And there's other ones out there too. It's not just drones. I introduced a bill.
So this one specifically goes towards drones, correct? Or
yes. So that bill goes towards drones.
I was only able to read through part of it, so I couldn't confirm.
so I also put in a bill that dealt with Stingray devices, which are known as cell site simulator devices, and what those essentially are little boxes that fit in a police automobile, and they flip a switch and they act as a cell phone tower, and all your data, all your conversations starts feeding through this police cell phone tower, and it can all be monitored, and there's no warrant requirement right now. And I think that's very, very scary that the police can flip on a box and every phone within a certain geographical distance will start feeding into this.
So they'll bounce off that tower kind of like they bounce off any other cell phone tower.
Yeah, they'll connect in. And you got to think of what our cell phones are. Steve Jobs, when he was talking about what the iPhone is, it's like, it's not a phone, it's you.
Yeah, it carries everything.
Everything is on our cell phones. And before police can start accessing that data in mass like this, I really feel there has to be a warrant issued by a judge based on probable cause that a crime has been committed. So I think there's a lot of issues out there that deal with core privacy issues that we need to get in front of, that we need to be diligent about as a legislature to make sure that our citizens' privacy rights are protected. Because if we don't have privacy in this country, if we don't have privacy in our state, I fear that we lose our individuality. I feel that we become just cookie-cutter people who are always scared about saying something that's maybe off or doing something that's unconventional because we believe someone is listening. And the results of that, I think,
would be catastrophic.
Yeah, I think it would be a country and a state that we don't recognize. And this is happening fast. The technology is happening fast, and we know it is. So I'm a big advocate for it.
So there were two separate bills. Did they both pass? Or
no, neither passed.
Neither did pass.
Neither passed, and I think that's unfortunate. There's one bill that did pass, and that was sponsored by Edie Agello, and I'm thrilled that it passed. It was watered down a little bit. But every about 7 seconds, your cell phone, your iPhone, Samsung 7. I hope you don't have one because it might be burning in your pocket right now. Whatever kind of phone you have, it pings your location every 7 seconds, and that's put into a database. And police have been accessing that geolocation data without any warrants, because the theory is that geolocation data is held by a third party, your cell phone company, and so you don't have an expectation of privacy in it. And that's based, going back to a Supreme Court case that said, you don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your accountant's records because they're not your records, they're your accountant's. So you can't assert illegal search and seizure of your accountant's records. So there's no Fourth Amendment protection. You don't have Fourth Amendment protections in the data held by third parties. And so the theory behind police being able to liberally access that data without a warrant is that it's not your data. It's the cell phone company's data. Your location is the cell phone company's data. And so EDHL will put in a bill to monitor. Oh, and just to go back. So they can't just find out where you are, right? This data is held up to 6 months to a year. So
they can find out where you've been and what your regular traveling is.
What you're doing, your whole life is on that cell phone, where you've been. I mean, it's mind-boggling what can be extrapolated from that data. And so EDHL put in a bill to require a warrant to issue before obtaining that data. It went through. It had to be watered down a little bit to pass. I'm thrilled it went through. But it was watered down in terms of notification to a subject person when their data was accessed. That was a requirement that was taken out. But it shows, I think, there's people are cognizant now of the privacy issues we face in this 21st century.
Did that bill only pass one side? Or
that passed.
All the way through?
All the way through. All the way through.
Cool.
So it's great.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing.
It's wonderful. So let's do the drones. Let's do the Stingray next year.
Definitely. Privacy, it just kind of, in my opinion, it's kind of common sense why it would go across all political perspectives. No matter what, you still want your privacy. You still want to be able to have your information and somebody else not to be able to just easily be like, oh, I'm gonna find what this is now, and no reasonable cause for it. So
yeah, and one of the arguments people say are, well, if the cell phone companies have access to it, what's the problem if the police have access to it? My response is like, the cops can put you in jail.
Yeah, cell phone
companies can't.
Yeah, they're just probably getting statistics out of it, and that's about it.
If there's any aspiring young entrepreneur out there, if you make a cell phone company with a data program that automatically deletes all data, I think you'd make a lot of money, because there's people out there who are concerned about this. Just an FYI to someone out there, if you want to create a program, I'd be your first customer.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then make sure you give Blake a call. Look what I just did. So, well, I have to say, the way I've heard you at the State House for different topics, wide range, and you are really terrific at articulating your points and your perspectives, and you just proved it again in the last, I don't even know how long we've been talking. So I just want to give you a great deal of credit for, you have a wonderful way of articulating anything that you have to say. I may or may not agree with you every time, but I do think that you have a wonderful way of putting it out there. So just giving you a little
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I learned that from my astronomy teacher.
How to speak?
My astronomy teacher told us about the most complicated things in the universe, basically, but he could do it in 2 sentences.
Oh, so
he told
technique.
Me his technique. You have to, if you can't boil a topic down to a few sentences, you don't know it well enough.
Technique. Awesome.
Yeah. So moving on.
Yes, I was going to say, we're going to flip the topic a little bit, and I'm going to start by asking you a question that you may or may not know in your ways of knowledge of what you've heard throughout the State House. But I today, as I was driving around, came across 2 or 3 signs that said something along the lines of road repaving or somethings like that. Roadworks coming fall 2016, Gina Raimondo. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't think the roadworks by name was our roads that we already maintain. And to boot, we're now paying for a sign to put out. Well, I didn't even travel across the whole state, and I passed a couple of them. So God knows how much money we just spent to say, oh, look what I'm about to do.
So I think there's two levels to disingenuousness or disingenuity. Those signs are on bridges that aren't being funded by roadworks. They're on...
This was just like regular.
Oh, they're coming 2018. But you know the signs with the green and the red or the yellow, if like the bridge is late? It's like that's our money that we pay in taxes. It's not the Garvey bonds. It's not the toll revenue because there isn't any yet. This is the money we've always paid in taxes, that we're continuing to pay in taxes. And they're saying, look what Roadworks has done. Look what Roadworks has done. It's a farce. It's a total farce.
And these signs that I just referenced are like on regular roads. They're not even bridges. They're just saying, oh, look, we're about to repave this road as part of Roadworks.
It is a total ploy to sell the people on this awful program that they passed. They're like, look, Roadworks is repaving your street. You know what? That street would have been repaved if Roadworks wasn't passed. These things are all over the state. It's not the Roadworks money. It's not any toll revenue. And I just think it's a marketing ploy because it's an election year and people are upset that the state went down this terrible road instead of making the hard choices to prioritize its budget.
Yeah, and now we just paid for all these ugly signs.
Yeah, I mean, that's 28. I mean, the estimate is it's about 28 grand in signs, and that's real money. But like the deeper issue is it's like we're being deceived by the signs. They're trying to get us to think that Roadworks program fixed your street. When no, your tax money they took from you fixed your street.
Right, and that's why I brought it in to a point. Because also, I know that you just recently wrote an article that was published in the Projo. And so I'm happy for you that you got it out there. But we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to let you go with your article and anybody that didn't already read it, what your point is and what you want people to take home and realize the truth and the full detail of what they should know about Roadworks. Because obviously they're getting signs giving them a different impression.
I'll try and do it in 2 minutes. How's that? So the ultimate point of the article is that the state should take the Sakonnet River Bridge gantry, which is no longer standing. They should put that up somewhere in the state and toll a truck pursuant to Roadworks to spur the truckers' lawsuit that Roadworks is unconstitutional. And they should do that before $38 to $50 million are spent on toll gantries throughout the state.
Okay.
That's essentially the argument. Roadworks I think it has major legal holes. Let's figure out those legal holes before we put up this massive tolling network. Because if we don't figure out the legal holes before we put up the massive tolling network, the solution is going to be to expand tolls. They're not going to, once they spend $50 million on tolls, they're not going to rip them down. Yeah. They're not going to rip them down. They're going to expand the vehicles tolled because that will be the remedy for the unconstitutional aspects of Roadworks.
Isn't there also a little misconception in how it's being perceived that there was recently a federal decision that says it's okay to toll and to toll trucks, but this decision doesn't actually say it's okay to toll only trucks, and it's being put out there by some people that is the actual decision that was decided? So
that decision was made by the Federal Highway Administration. And that decision said, yeah, tolls are okay there. It didn't say that it's only okay to toll trucks. It didn't take away the rights of the truckers to sue that it's unconstitutional under the United States Constitution's Commerce Clause. Some federal agency can't undermine the Constitution. It can't undermine the truckers' claim that this is a violation of what's called the Dormant Commerce Clause. And the Dormant Commerce Clause essentially says that states can't take action that unduly burdens or favors burdens out-of-state commerce or unduly favors in-state commerce. And I think there are major compelling arguments that Roadworks is oppressive to interstate commerce. And want me to go into it? I'm happy to. I'd love to. Okay.
You do that.
Okay, so I see there's two compelling aspects of violation of the Dormant Commerce Clause in Roadworks. The first is only tolling tolling long-haul trucks. Here's why. Long-haul trucks are predominantly used in interstate commerce. Smaller trucks that aren't tolled are predominantly used in local commerce. So by only tolling long-haul trucks, the state largely shifts its infrastructure repair burden onto interstate commerce.
Mm-hmm.
That type,
sense.
yeah, it does. So that type of protectionism is usually disfavored, and here's why: you're going to have every state now attempting to shift its infrastructure repair burden onto interstate commerce. And courts are going to, I believe they're going to say, you cannot do that. You have to expand the vehicles that are tolled to a broader class, including those that predominantly operate in local commerce. That's the first reason why roadworks, I believe, is potentially unlawful. The second are the daily toll limits. So you have, I think, a $40 per day limit and only one toll per toll facility per day. What that means is that a truck that intensively uses state roads, right? Someone who's going, Providence, Cranston, Warwick, South Kingstown, Westerly, all day, boom, 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 all day, only pays $40 in tolls. However, someone who just passes through Rhode Island is going to pay a much larger per toll amount. So a local guy could go under 100 tolls a day and only pay $40, where an interstate, someone operating an interstate just passing through Rhode Island may pay $40 and they only go under 5 tolls. So that's a forced subsidy onto local commerce by interstate commerce. And so I think that those limits, the daily limits, the $40 per day and the one toll per facility, I think that those are going to get knocked down, and that's going to dramatically raise the price of tolls on our in-state operators. And the legislature at that point will be compelled to expand tolling to other classes of vehicles to take the burden off of the in-state operators. And maybe that other class of vehicles are our passenger cars.
And isn't it something like, is it 18, 20 gantries, or am I completely wrong?
Oh, there's no limit in the legislation. Everyone thinks that it's only 16 or 18 or 20 gantries. The bill that was passed by the legislature has no limit. It's up to the discretion of the DOT as to how many gantries they're going to put in. So maybe their plan is for 16 or 18, but it could be 100.
And we're only so big.
And how about this?
I feel like you're going to hit a toll every 5 miles.
What about seasonal gantries or, license plate readers that don't, instead of having a big toll gantry that goes over, you can just park a car on the side of the road with the new license plate reader technology and toll cars or trucks. So let's put them up seasonally on Aquidneck Island and South County to get all the money from the tourists that are coming through and all the shipment of food and beverages that are going down there because it's an active season. There's nothing that limits in our law where these tolls go. I mean, there may be limits through the Federal Highway Administration, but in the state law we passed, there's none.
Wow. I tried to read it. That was a really long document. So I didn't get all of everything out of it that I probably should have. But then I have people like you. I can just ask.
I'll come on anytime, Amy.
So to recap, basically, when did the Projo was 3 days ago?
I think that came out on Wednesday or Thursday. You just type in my name, like Blake Filippi, Projo Tolls. You'll be able to pull it up.
And your basic thing is let's just get one of these up and then see what happens from it.
Yeah, there's a hell of an argument that they're not legal. Let's figure out whether they're legal before we spend $50 million.
Yeah, that's so much money.
It's so high. It's easy. We have the gantry. It's sitting there in a warehouse. Let's put it up.
How long has it been sitting there? I can see the reply being it doesn't work anymore.
No, they took it down from the Sakonnet River Bridge this past spring.
Oh, it hasn't been
Yeah, it hasn't been long enough to make that argument.
Okay. For those of you just tuning in, we're talking with Blake Filippi, and we've discussed privacy, roadworks, and a neat little slavery history lesson. And is there anything else? Actually, why don't you tell the listeners really quick how they can get a hold of you? They can find you on social media. What are some?
Yeah, type in my name, Blake, Blake, Filippi, F is in freedom, ILIPPI. You can find me on Facebook, the internets,
Blake36.com, right?
Blake36.com. My email's there. I think I even have my cell phone there. Don't prank
He
me,
totally
please.
does, because that's how I called him
And
today.
I want to talk about these issues with anyone. I mean, it's really important. The state could be an amazing place if we make the right decisions and elect the right people to office.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This is Colors of Politics on RI Free Radio. Find us on Twitter and Facebook at Colors of RI. Have a great night.
Good night.